My name is Darla. I was never supposed to be anyone's example, not at school, not at work, and definitely not at home. But I became one anyway, for all the wrong reasons. I was 25, working late nights at a grocery store stocking shelves, barely surviving after my husband passed away in a car accident 3 years earlier. My son, Logan, was 7, quiet, soft-spoken, and always clutching the same stuffed bear with one ear missing. We lived in the basement of my parents' house, if you could call that living. It was damp, unfinished, and smelled like mold and regret. But it was all I could afford after paying for Logan's therapy and the food we both survived on. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. From the outside, my parents seemed like small-town saints. Church-going, well-dressed. My mom taught Sunday school. My dad ran a used car lot. Everyone called them the kind Thompsons. But behind their front door, behind the lace curtains and polite smiles, I was just a failed investment. A disappointment who got pregnant too young, married someone without ambition, and came crawling back when it all crumbled. The rules in that house weren't written down, they were barked. No second servings unless my sister wasn't home. No showers after 7 p.m. to save hot water. And Logan? My son wasn't called by his name, just the boy, as if he was some stranger I brought home without permission. It started with slaps. If I forgot to do the dishes, I'd get slapped across the back of my head while Logan watched, frozen. If Logan spilled juice on the carpet, my mom would yank me by the arm and hiss, "That's what happens when trash raises trash." But the worst part? The looks Logan gave me. Silent, confused, like he didn't understand why the people who called themselves Grandma and Grandpa were the ones who hurt his mom. Then came the Tuesday night. I had just come home from a double shift 14 hours straight, my hands aching, my legs trembling. Logan had a low-grade fever and he'd fallen asleep on the living room couch while watching cartoons. My mom came in and immediately started shouting, "Why is he on my couch with his filthy shoes on?" "He's sick, Mom. He just needed a nap." Before I could finish, my dad stormed in from the garage, wrench in hand, face red. "Didn't we say your boy doesn't touch the furniture?" he growled. "He's not family. He's a leech like his mother." I tried to move Logan, but he stirred and cried out, half asleep and scared. That's when my dad grabbed me by the hair and dragged me away from the couch like I was a sack of garbage. "You want to defy us in our house?" he snarled. Then the first punch came, right in the stomach. I collapsed to the floor gasping, but what tore me apart wasn't the pain, it was Logan screaming in the background, "Stop, Mommy!" My dad didn't stop. He pulled me back up by my shirt collar and slapped me across the face so hard my ear rang. My mom stood by the stairs, arms folded, watching like this was some twisted lesson plan. And then my dad turned to Logan and said, "Let him see what happens when you don't follow orders." It's called parenting. That moment burned itself into my son's face. His little body was trembling, his eyes wide, his voice gone. He didn't cry anymore. He just stood there. I wanted to die. Not because of the pain, but because my son now had that image inside him, his mother being beaten like a dog while her own father called it parenting. That night I waited until they were asleep. I took Logan back down to the basement, wrapped his tiny body in all the blankets I had, and held him against me like he was the last warmth on earth. I didn't sleep. I stared at the water-stained ceiling and counted every crack in the plaster until I knew what I had to do. I couldn't run, not yet. I had nothing, no money, no car, no job that paid enough to even afford first month's rent. But I would wait. I would prepare. And one day my parents were going to learn what parenting really looked like and how it felt when a daughter finally grew a spine and broke theirs. They turned my son into a witness. I'd turn them into a memory. I started hiding things, small things, but they were mine. I opened a drawer behind the water heater in the basement and used it like a vault. I stashed $5 bills, then tens, then any leftover tips I got when customers at work felt generous. I found an old duffel bag and packed it slowly over weeks. First aid kit, extra socks, spare clothes for Logan, copies of our birth certificates that I took from my mother's filing cabinet while she was gardening. I began walking to work instead of taking the bus. It saved a little, but more importantly, it let me think. Those long, silent walks became my planning sessions. I'd look at houses for rent posted on telephone poles, memorized routes to the library and school from nearby neighborhoods, asked quiet questions to customers who mentioned rental signs. I learned to smile without showing fear. But inside the house, nothing changed. My mom grew colder. If Logan laughed too loud, she'd say, "Why is he always making noise like a stray dog?" And if I dared speak up, my dad would say, "Looks like the mutt still has a bark. Maybe we should break that too." One night, after I worked a triple shift during the holidays, I came home with blistered feet and a bonus envelope, a measly $75, but it felt like gold. I thought stupidly, maybe I could bring home some cupcakes just to make Logan smile. When I walked in, Logan was sitting on the floor of the kitchen, hands in his lap, staring blankly at the wall. I bent down, touched his shoulder, and he flinched. "Baby," I whispered. "He said if I cried again, he'd throw my bear into the fireplace," Logan said quietly, not even turning his head. So I stopped crying. My dad walked in behind me and sneered. "He's learning, see? That's called discipline." I couldn't speak. I just sat next to my son on that cold tile floor and nodded, but inside me something finally snapped, not from pain, but from clarity. That was the last night I would ever sit on a floor someone else shoved me to. That weekend I used my one day off to take Logan to the corner store. We sat on the curb, sharing a can of soda, and I told him we were going to leave soon. He looked up at me, eyes big and tired. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere with light," I said. "Somewhere no one tells you to stop being a kid." I kept working, kept pretending. I smiled when my mom mocked my paycheck. I nodded when my dad called me a walking burden. And the day finally came 6 months later when I had just enough saved to put down a deposit on a tiny apartment 3 blocks from Logan's school. It wasn't perfect. Peeling walls, a rusted sink, but it had locks on the inside and no one else had keys. I waited until a Thursday night when my parents had their church potluck. I packed the duffel bag, grabbed Logan, and we left. No note, no call, no goodbyes. But I didn't just vanish. I started working at a diner downtown, early morning shifts. A kind waitress named Marcy let me share rides until I could afford a used bike. Logan started smiling again, slowly. He kept that bear, and now he laughed when the stuffing came out instead of crying. I taped his art to the wall. I cooked frozen waffles like they were 5-star meals. I read him to sleep every night with my voice shaking from exhaustion, but it was our home. Then, about 4 months after we left, my dad showed up at my job. He stood at the counter like he owned the place, looking around in disgust. "You think this is an upgrade?" he hissed. "You're nothing without us. That boy is nothing. You'll come crawling back." I stared him dead in the eye and said nothing, just slowly placed 2 fresh plates of pancakes in front of the table behind him and walked away. That night, Logan found a rock on the sidewalk and said, "Mommy, this one's lucky." He was right. Because the next morning I learned that their house, the one they used to lord over me, was being sold. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't plan to go back. Not for closure, not for confrontation, but sometimes fate puts the match in your hand, and all you have to do is light it. A woman named Cora came into the diner one day, a real estate agent who always tipped well. She asked me if I knew anyone looking for a fixer-upper in the North End, a foreclosure listing with terrible karma but good bones. She slid the photo across the counter. It was their house. That old gray porch, that splintered door, that place where I had been hit, mocked, and humiliated in front of my son again and again. I stared at it for a long time. "You okay, hon?" Cora asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'll take it." She laughed at first until I pulled out the envelope I'd been saving. I'd kept putting away tips and side money from sewing work I'd done for Marcy's friends. All that cash was meant for a second-hand car. Instead, I bought the house. But not to live in. I didn't paint the walls. I didn't fix the plumbing. I didn't move in furniture. I made one change and one change only. I I removed the locks and left the door wide open. Every day after school, Logan and I would walk by it, and every day I'd say loud enough for anyone nearby, "That's where people used to live who thought pain made them powerful, but now it's empty." Just like they are. One evening, I saw my mom walking by the gate. She had bags under her eyes, looked older than I remembered, brittle, hollow. She peeked in like she was trying to see if anything had survived. I watched from across the street, standing beside Logan, arms folded. She didn't even recognize me at first, then her eyes locked on mine. She opened her mouth to say something. I shook my head slowly like you'd shoo away a stranger. Then I turned to Logan and said, "Let's go, baby. You don't need to breathe that air." A week later, I took out an ad in the local paper and online listings. Free access to haunted house full of regret. Former owners destroyed lives. Maybe you can hear the screams. People thought it was a Halloween gimmick. Teens came in droves. TikToks were made. People spray painted the walls. Someone wrote in red letters, "Monsters raised here." I never stopped it. My parents showed up at my apartment weeks later. Jasmine stood beside them in oversized sunglasses like she was too good to be there. They begged not with tears, but with desperation. Their name was being dragged. Their past was getting out. Neighbors were whispering. Jasmine's job interview had been pulled when someone saw the online video of the graffiti on the house. "Please," my dad said, "you've made your point. You're embarrassing the family." I looked at all three of them, then at Logan, who stood tall now, no fear in his eyes anymore. I leaned down beside him and whispered, "What do we say when someone tries to guilt us?" He said loud and clear, "We're not a garbage can. We don't take your trash." I smiled. Exactly. I turned to my parents and sister. "Family comes first, right?" I said coldly. "Too bad I'm not yours anymore." They stood there, stunned, unsure whether to beg or curse. Then I closed the door. And this time I locked it. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching